A lot of great things occurred in the 1960s. The Doctor Who series aired for the first time, the Beatles got together, and we successfully put a man on the moon. For the 1960s, there were also several tragedies that shook the United States. For example, there was the assassination of beloved President John F. Kennedy. There was also the assassination of civil rights leader Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. And don't forget about the notorious Manson family murders. The first tragedy to occur was the assassination of JFK. John F. Kennedy won the U.S. presidential election in 1960, where he became the 35th President of the United States. With him, he brought hope and inspiration for a new generation. But that hope was quickly lost on November 22, 1963, when beloved President John F. Kennedy was assassinated. According to the information found on the website jfklibrary.com, JFK, along with his wife Jacqueline Kennedy, as well as Texas Governor John Connally and his wife Nellie Connally, were riding in a motorcade through Dealey Plaza in Dallas, Texas, on their way to speak at a luncheon. It was then at 12:30 p.m. where several shots were fired, wounding the governor and killing the president. The gunman who assassinated President Kennedy was a former sniper of the U.S. Marines, Lee Harvey Oswald. Oswald had stationed himself on the 6th floor of the Texas School Book Depository at the corner of Houston and Elm Street and waited for JFK to come into sight. After firing multiple shots, Oswald fled to the Texas Theater 3 miles away, where he was finally caught in the lobby at 1:45 p.m. After being in police custody for 3 days, Oswald was shot and killed by nightclub owner Jack Ruby. Almost 5 years later, another heartbreaking tragedy had occurred. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was a social activist who led the civil rights movement in the United States until his death in 1968. He is best known for his speech entitled, "I Have a Dream," where he preached about nonviolent equality between all races. And while many people loved his fight for equality, many people did not. According to the findings on archive.gov, shortly after 6 p.m. on April 4, 1968, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was shot in front of his hotel room in Memphis, Tennessee. He was rushed to the hospital where he was pronounced dead an hour later. The man who shot and killed Dr. King was named James Earl Ray, a 40-year-old escaped convict from Missouri State Penitentiary. Ray had shot King from the bathroom of his motel room across the street from the Lorraine Motel where King was staying. After successfully assassinating King with only one shot, Ray fled the scene and was undiscovered until 1968, where he was arrested for the murder of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. 1 year later, he pled guilty to the murder of Dr. King and received a sentence of 99 years in prison. Not long after the assassination of Martin Luther King Jr., one of the most notorious cult leaders and serial killers appeared. As told in the book Helter Skelter by Vincent Bugliosi and Kurt Gentry, on August 9th and 10th of 1969, some of the most horrific murders took place in Hollywood, California. Those murders were organized by a man named Charles Manson. Starting in 1967, Manson had begun recruiting young men and women to join his cult, dubbed the Manson family, who he would later on manipulate to murder 7 people over the course of 2 days. On August 9th, 1969, Manson and 4 of his followers embarked on a killing spree, beginning in the home of director Roman Polanski, where they brutally murdered his wife, actress Sharon Tate, who was 8 months pregnant at the time, as well as coffee heiress Abigail Folger, writer Wojciech Frykowski, hairstylist Jay Sebring, and Stephen Parent, who was a friend of the gardener. The next day, Manson and his followers also invaded the home of supermarket owner Lino LaBianca, and he killed him and his wife Rosemary. It wasn't until October of 1969 that Manson and his followers were arrested for stealing cars. While in prison, Susan Atkins admitted to killing Sharon Tate, which led detectives to believe that Manson and his followers were the ones behind the heinous crimes. Charles Manson and his followers, Tex Watson, Susan Atkins, Patricia Krenwinkel, and Linda Kasabian, were all sentenced to life in prison. Now, the 1960s had a lot of good, but they also had a lot of bad. And these three murders, there's two assassinations and one heinous murder, has gone down in history, making the 1960s one of the most tragic decades in over 100 years. Thank you for watching.